Okay, we're talking about ethics, aesthetics, and asceticism. Is the three terms that kind of go into it. And before I sort of dig into the meat of it, we're going to talk about some. Well, actually, first I want to talk about ethics. Has sort of perplexed me for a long time. It was kind of the thing that got me into philosophy. Ethics and theology were the two things. In high school, I took a morals and ethics class. Uh, it was a sort of philosophy course that was a part of a series of like every year at the high school I went to that was Catholic. You had a religion class essentially, and in high school they were more kind of ramped up. Whereas I forget, freshman year was the Bible, sophomore year was like church history, church history. Junior year was no, junior year was church history. Sophomore year was like sacramental theology. Um, and then senior year was morals and ethics. And we sort of went through a, it was a kind of it's a kind of pretty standard ethics 101 class where you talk about different theories of ethics. I hate philosophy as talking about in a disinterested kind of crappy outside manner where you talk about different theories of different things in that sort of way. It's very you never get anywhere. You never get anywhere, and it doesn't. I don't know. It can open a true spirit of questioning, but often it ends up sort of foreclosing it at the end. I don't know. There's something about the kind of aporia that opens up that seems very unhelpful, even though that aporia is like an important part of, I don't know, thinking about ethics. And especially they always do divine command theory so dirty. They do divine command theory dirty. They do shoot, what's that Plato dialogue that they always read for the Euthyphro. They do the Euthyphro dialogue so dirty. But anyway, it perplexed me because you just ended up the sort of aporia that it left you at was an opening for me to really wonder that, like, wow, the way that the world is presented to us and the way it's talked about is really there's something lacking in there. But then that got kind of sutured up. That got kind of sutured up when I got into internet leftism, and they sort of presented a different theory of ethics that I don't know, sort of it sort of sutured the gap up for me, and that didn't really open up again for a while when I got back into philosophy. But anyway, that was maybe too much introduction. So general concerns. We're talking about ethics. This is a theory of ethics that is not going to align with any sort of, I don't know, normal theory of ethics that people are used to talking about. This is not a uh this is definitely not a consequentialism. It's not like deontology, quote unquote. Although Kant is very influential on this, both through the people that I'm reading, and also I happen to be reading Critique of Pure Reason right now. Although that's not really about ethics. That's the next second critique where he gets into that. But I have read um, Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals. Um, I've read all of it, I think twice, and then I've read parts of it more than twice. Um, and so that is sort of influential in my thinking, but I sort of read it in a sort of twisted way via Lacan and Lacan's ethics. But I also, anyway, who cares about it? Talking about influences too much is a plague. I'm sorry for doing it. Um, General concerns. General concerns. We're not talking about deontology. We're not talking about categorical imperative. We're not talking about any of that dumb crap that everyone wants to tell you about that doesn't actually leave you any more equipped to think about anything. Um, so here are some general ideas to keep in mind. So the first thing, okay, up in the left corner is sort of what we're looking for. So we um, at the basis of this theory is um, a understanding of human beings as beings that are designed, that are come from nothing, or perhaps like are born from a wound, depending on if you're thinking about it from a materialist or a spiritual perspective. From a spiritual perspective, oh my god, like Christian dogmatics is that the world is created from nothing, and so we sort of have no ground except God. But then from a more like thinking about it from like a psychoanalytic perspective, we sort of come into being through trauma that sort of like we like kind of pulls us out of the regular world. There's like a regular there's a kind of ordinary life, and then something pulls you out of it, and your subjectivity is sort of nothing but like a series of these compounding where smooth functioning things break, and then as something breaks, you develop a perspective and an eye based like to sort of scab over the wound, and sort of like there's something about the eye that is able to kind of hold together like a narrative that doesn't work anymore, or anyway, but that's getting to anyway. um but so what we're, as a being who has some sort of wound or comes from nothing, we are aimed towards becoming, um healing the wound and making something of the wound. um so in other words, we're oriented towards a sort of infinite, endless becoming, where we become more and more like united with the world as we go out into the world and we find things in the world and we engage with them and they change who we are. So that's a very important aspect, is that like there you are this thing that changes every time you interact with an outside thing, and this is a thing that continuously happens. And so there's this union that is happening between you and the world as you sort of learn and grow, and sort of learn and develop higher perspectives, and see the rules that are governing things like from a rational perspective, and then sort of have like a kind of nuanced, like powerful aesthetic perspective from a kind of irrational perspective, or from like a divine perspective. You see the oneness of all things in a kind of more mystical way. These sort of things happen as you grow and change, but at the same time, your particular point of view is unique. Oh my god, my hands, the hands the hand it's my hands fallen out of the thing. um your perspective, your particular perspective is unique and irreducibly so, and will never be completely erased. This is uh this is another important thing. So you are becoming, there's this oneness that's happening, this movement towards like the, oh my god, wow, how do I get the gesticulation to work a little bit better? Do I need to back up more? Okay. Yeah, so there's this movement towards like oneness of everything, and then there's also a movement towards uniqueness. And so that there's the identity of all things, and then your infinite difference as yourself. Um but in order for both of these to happen, you have to be going through a process of becoming. You have to change, you have to grow, you have to encounter alterity. So, alterity is a word that I like to say, but I should probably say words that are less fancy. But alterity means otherness, otherness. Um, and so this is in the top left corner over there. This sort of diagram of transcending. So you're always becoming more and different from what you are. That is the goal. That is health. That is good. That is like what goodness is at the most kind of abstract level, is growing and changing, because we are finite and we're never infinite. To be truly good, to be truly free, to be truly whole would be to be God. But we can never be God. We can only move towards God. Like we are being beckoned towards God infinitely. Or from a kind of non-religious perspective, we sort of like, we're always, we can only move forward. There's only becoming, there's only change. And to arrest that change is like, that is what sin is at the most abstract level. Because to we can only move towards God. So to be estranged from God is to like be static. But what that's very, but it at the very, that's very abstract. But that um in concrete instances, it applies in very different ways. So, and then at the bottom is a little diagram here of sort of the perspective we find ourselves in the current day, in terms of how, when we try to think about how to act and how to figure out what the good is. Because from an ordinary perspective, or just in general, we no longer have kind of direct access to the good and the true and the beautiful, or at least maybe no one ever did, but we certainly don't perceive ourselves to have it in the way that we used to. This is the narrative of the death of God, right? So religion has been pushed out of its central role in the world, and we live in kind of a secularized society that is dominated by money and certain power structures and sort of individualism. And so we have kind of two perspectives that we are constantly oscillating between, both of which leave you completely paralyzed, and between which is uh, you're completely arrested. You are completely for becoming is completely foreclosed. It's impossible to think. It's impossible to do. The first is sort of the perspective that is encouraged by consumer society, and so this is like this is like the totally voluntarist, baseless, like um, infinite ego is one way to put it, and you can compare it to like it's the and so the in Transcendental Qabala, the opposite of the transcendental, which is the state I described earlier, is the Hyperborean. So the Hyperborea, like near the pole, where you have the sun is visible for long periods of time and the sun doesn't set. And so you're in this kind of frozen zone with the sun beating down infinitely. And so this when I'm the sun here in this case, I don't actually remember when I'm using it to in this particular metaphorical way. The sun is like this sort of ego that just wants and just wants and just wants, and you it does not have to have a basis. It does not have to have a reference to a thing. There's always a little treat to get. It's basically the world of little treats. It's the world of little treats. It's the world of satisfaction. It's the world that has no reference to anything and does not need to justify itself. Um, and this is basically you can't live like that. You can't live like that, and it precludes access to really transcending yourself and really becoming something different, because you just it's instead of having this movement between you and alterity, you are just it's just you. It's just you. There's only the ego, right? So it's sort of like it's sort of like a kind of perverse uh um like inversion of in the Upanishads, right? There's this line where I forget which Upanishad it's in. Um, it might be in the Isha Upanishad, where it's like, "Oh sun, remove your orb from the sky, that I may see that very self that is I." Right, and so the in the Isha Upanishad, like the self is like this inner divine core that is God, that is everywhere. That's like this like non-dual ish kind of thing, depending on how you read it. But this is like a transcending kind of oneness that is like beyond desire and sort of this spiritual thing, right? Whereas we have a very like this is compared to a simple like solipsistic kind of thing. And so that's the sun. That's the sun, is the simple solipsism. Oh my god. Just sun beating down, holding you down. And then opposite to this, where and this is thinking yourself with absolutely no restrictions, right? You're not able to posit some sort of good that like to discipline yourself or to work towards or to like join a cause that is higher or more than yourself, right? This is this is like your total in like total Hobbesian individual mindset, right? Where there is nothing worth, there is no incorporated being that you have joined yourself to. It's just you, and it's just your fear. You're just your fear, just your base desires to be comfortable or whatever. Opposite of this is this sort of like pseudo scientific, hard materialist Darwinism kind of mode, right? Where like you and this is the so you have the ego sun in the sky that is totally voluntarist, and then opposite this you have the hard ground that is purely determined and sort of completely scorched, where it's only you can only see like you can only see the determinism, you can only see wait one second, I'm getting messages. Okay, none of these are important. Okay. The um there is nothing there is nothing that can really be done, right? The world is already completely out of your control. There's all these systems, right? There's all these systems that you can't do anything about that are running the entire world. You are determined for who you're going to be based on your biology and based on your upbringing, right? Like it's this sort of it's sort of like this is sort of goes together with like a victim mindset. It also like you can think about it in terms of creativity, right? It can be very, very hard to start making something original because you're like, oh my God, how can I even be anything other than my influences, right? Everything that could ever be made has already been made. And especially in the internet age and now with AI and stuff, there's just so much stuff. It's just an endless inundation. Inundation, actually, I think the word is actually inundation. I learned this recently. Whatever. There's like this great sea of things that you're constantly seeing and constantly flooded with. And it's so hard to imagine making something that could mean anything to anyone or anything. Or that's really original at all. It's hard to imagine living a life that isn't just like completely like determined by the systems and by money and by like what you have to do or where you are. Like just like we have this scientific awareness of the world where we can see the sort of mechanisms behind everything, and it's hard to imagine being free in any way at all, um because of this. And these two kind of enslaved modes of um these two sort of enslaved modes of wow, it's so hard to get my hand to stay detected, of thinking, uh sustain each other. They sustain each other because if it's like if the world is completely determined, well, I might as well just like I might as well just waste all my time, you know uh uh eating junk food and smoking weed or whatever, right? um and like, why should I try to achieve my dreams? Why should I try to like be a part of something that's bigger than myself? um okay. Wow, this intro section is taking me longer than I expected. I guess that's fine. um Let me make sure everything's working right before I continue. Okie dokie, it looks like it is. um Okie dokie. Yeah. Okay, and so then there's this idea that I like to call the guardian angel. Um, and there's different ways to think about this. I'm sort of thinking about I don't know, the way the guardian angel is talked about in Meditations on the Tarot by Tomberg. You could also relating it to a sort of like pure will, true self thing. So you could think about it in terms of oh my god, thelema. Um, but you can Christian conception is also directly relevant here. It's also connected to what I'm talking about with the I don't with the self in the Upanishads. But anyway, the and ignore that I misspelled sacrificial, by the way. Um, there is this divine core inside of you that is in you, that's more than you, and it sort of helps for me to think about it as guardian angel because it's me, but it's sort of this thing that's other than me, that is um hard to see clearly, hard to grasp, and hard to it's inner, it's close to me, and it knows me, and it like it has this sort of fulfillment for me that is more than I could handle at any given time. Like it always there's this deferral that's involved. um and there's something about it that's just very, very special, and sort of goes past these other distinctions. And it sort of has two modes that it appear in that have to be thought together, even though they seem opposed. Which is that there is uh, and you can sort of relate them to the voluntarist and determinist modes that I put earlier. So related to the voluntarist mode is this idea of like a true will, that like down in your core there is some higher version of your ego that wants a little treat, your ego that like sees the world around you as everything to be like to take pleasure from, and only as that. This is a kind of corruption or a degradation of a good thing. And at the core of that, there is some part of you that's uh, how do I put this? Like, there is some part of you that uh has this just like pure, intense, like unique, powerful, like boundary breaking desire that doesn't obey rules and doesn't follow anyone else's logic. There's this very particular logic that is unique to you and can only be rendered into the world by you, that is very special. And your guardian angel delivers this to you. And then on the other side, there is sacrificial love, which is sort of the opposite of this, where you are subsuming yourself to a project that is bigger than you, outside of you, or especially to someone else who needs you. And this is, a very important part of Christian ethics. But it's also like in the same way. So it's easy to say. So like this idea that like you have this idea that you have a will that's unique to yourself, that you have to realize, and that like doesn't care about other people, like it doesn't care about boundaries and restrictions and rules and kind of the morals of your society. So that I'll get more into that later, but that's important, right? So your this does not have it's like orthogonal to um the morals of the world that you're involved in. It's not it's not related to ordinary rules. It's more abstract than that. It's more divine than that. It's more, yeah. But at the same time, like it's very easy to imagine someone who is very self-involved and just kind of hurts people, and or lies and just like, yeah, just causes, like goes around causing harm because they are, they're totally engrossed in themselves. And this idea is that there's a higher version of this that would somehow be good and is somehow divine. um but in order to arrive at that, you have to also be able to think sacrificial love. You have to be able to think that you have the gift that you have to bring into the world isn't just for you. In fact, it might not even be primarily for you. It's primarily for others who need it. Like as you grow, as you go through your, like, you transcend and you gain this wisdom that is meant to be passed on and shared and sort of given to those who need it, given to those who can benefit from it, given, and also like set up for a generation that is to come after you and to take like what you have and bring it to places that you wouldn't have expected and maybe even wouldn't have wanted. Like there is this kind of letting go aspect that has to be involved, both in the present and with an eye towards the future. And um and there's this sort of acceptance of limits and this sort of like acceptance of um part of the acceptance of God's love, and also of like your engagement with the guardian angel, who is sort of your your place where your finitude is kind of hooked up to the infinite, right? um uh, is that you have to accept that it is more than whatever you are right now. Like the just having this special thing in you is not it's not the same as what you are right now. And even though it is you, and there's something beautiful and important and empowering, and it's important to accept that it is you, but it is you and it isn't you. It is you and it isn't you. And it's very, very, it's that there's this, when you really read philosophy, this sort of weird middle zone starts to appear. And it's very hard to describe, but there's this way that it is you and that it isn't you, and it sort of like flickers in and out of like the ability to kind of see it and understand that it is you and that it isn't you. And yeah. Anyway, so these are the general ideas. Oh boy. um. Okay. And now, so here are the okay, so aesthetics in Transcendental Qabala, there are 7 virtues of aesthetics, which are basically like the ways that you engaging with these virtues are how you sort of move from the Hyperborean to the Transcendental, how you make contact, like how you bring your guardian angel like into the world, um, into you, and sort of make contact with God's will and kind of bring it into the world. And there's 7. 4 of them are uh, secular, and 3 of them are divine. Um, The four secular ones are, you can think of, if you happen to know Lacan, which I guess you probably don't. Yeah, you might if you're watching this, you might know Lacan. You can link them to the four discourses. The respectively, the act links to the master discourse, scene links to the discourse of the university, motive links to the analyst discourse, and stage links to the hysterics discourse. Or actually, would motive be hysterics discourse? Or I just thought about that. I just made this connection before which is, it's silly that I didn't make this connection before. I just made this connection before I started the stream. Um, anyway, you can link them to the four discourses. I forget. It's you. Anyway, okay. So, what are these? What are these? So these are stages that happen in the course of being engaged in, like, creating, acting, learning, living, growing in a robust, like, lively, healthy, um demi-divine manner. Um so what you and so what we're trying to think about ethics abstracted from moral rules that exist actually in the world, right? Because which is what we have to do, right? Because we have seen that, the morals that were taken for granted, um, kind of the morals that were taken for granted from traditional Christianity or from polite society, kind of did imperialism and slaughtered just countless people across the world, right? And I am a trans woman, right? And so I'm always bearing in mind how previous social rules would not have permitted me to be even who I am here. And I'll use this more as an example as we go, right? So you can think about the moment when act is like you're taking a inspired leap against like the sort of ordinary rules of a situation. Like, there is this sort of gut feeling, there's this sort of thing that there's this sort of encounter you have. There's some kind of encounter you have with the truth in the world or inside of yourself. Like, there's this intense moment where you realize that there is a possibility to do something that is new, that feels like authentic and real, but doesn't align with any sort of previous logic. Like, your world breaks open. Like, this is sort of what happens when you really fall in love, right? This is a falling in love is an example that philosophers use to talk about this a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Um, you fall in love, and suddenly, like, the everything changes, and you see something that you couldn't see before. You know something that you couldn't know before, and then there is, like, the question of how you act after that. But we'll get back to that. So the openness and the cultivating your awareness of, like, you want to have a cultivated awareness for when these special moments open up, and have the courage and to act on them while you have the ability to. Um and when you realize, when I realized I was trans, I sort of had the option to embrace this. And despite the fact that, like, I had no idea what would really happen. Like, it could have destroyed my life. It really messed up my relationship with my friends at the time, and my family, and it caused all this discord. It almost ruined my time in college. There was all these dangers. There was all these uncertainties. I didn't really know I couldn't even understand what, like, it would even really mean to be trans. Like, the time between when I found out about trans people and when I realized I was trans was very short. There was you're just staring kind of into an abyss, but you know that there's something in there that's calling you, right? And this is a very, very excellent example. Okay. And so that's an act, and an act opens up a scene. So the master discourse is, that's, so the act is Lacan, master discourse, scene is then discourse of the university. Um, where so the act is maybe wait, maybe is act the it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have made the comparison before sitting down and looking at them and thinking about it a little bit more. I just I anyway. The okay. So then um you have this range of possibilities that have been opened up within this new world, right? The act opens up a new world, and then you have a range of possibilities, and then there is a virtue associated with like staying faithful to the act that you did, because if you have made this act and it was a real act, you are probably going to be encountering resistance in the world around you. It's going to be causing friction because it went against normal logic. There's smooth functioning like rules for like society as a whole, individual kind of like social groups and different zones have a logic they follow. They have implicit rules, explicit rules. And when you make a real act like this, you end up going against these rules and you cause friction. And it can, and sometimes this is, this can be both good and bad, right? This can be people pushing back on you, people feeling jealous, people like trying to drag you back in, but also like this can cause sort of turmoil where other people are inspired by this. They see it and they want to follow, they want to like, it inspires them to do their own thing. And this can sort of create all sort of like all kinds of chaos that isn't necessarily bad, but it's difficult to deal with when you're trying to deal with your own thing and suddenly someone else is dealing with their thing, right? And the trans example just makes this perfect. But it's it's also very obvious if you've done artistic creation too. There's this effect that when you start creating, it has on other people around you. That's very very particular. But yeah, and so that but then there is a virtue associated with like being willing to having the integrity to stick through whatever the logic of your act was. And there is a way to, you know, you want to go all the way through with it, right? Like you sort of have to. So you have to remember, we're starting with this world where you have only determinism and voluntarism that you're sort of grappling between, right? You have this absolute freedom and this absolute determinism, and it's hard to see anything between them because you can see these rules, and you can know that the rules exist mostly to control people, and you can know that like you are probably acting in accordance with like something that's set up inside of you that's like a wound from the past, or just sort of instincts because you're an animal and sort of all this stuff. And you're dealing with kind of resistance and friction and discomfort. Um, and like you're in a zone that doesn't fully make sense, and people are saying like, why don't you just do something that makes sense? Why don't you make it make sense? Why are you doing this things that doesn't make sense to us? Why aren't you just following the rules? Why doesn't your thing follow like just the logic, the normal logic, the normal language, the normal rules, right? But the thing that you have to remember is that the normal logic, the normal language, the normal rules that they're under are probably generally, maybe if not always, founded on some kind of lie, or at least are lacking, right? The ordinary life is like a zone where um the ordinary life is a diminished zone of life compared to like living a vital enhanced like creative powerful rich life. Where it's this zone of like simulacra, right? Where you have like these truths that are founded by, you know, divine interventions in the world, and also inspired people who are inspired, and sort of special things happening, wonderful works of art or beautiful things in the world sort of create these situations that sort of then develop a language and a logic around them, and then that language and logic sort of like continues to live on past its original usefulness, and then suddenly people are sort of trapped in the zone where they think they have to follow these sets of rules that actually don't serve a use anymore, right? And you can think about, once again, we can think about the gender example, right? Why the gender example is obvious. um, okay, then inevitably though, this scene can't last forever. This scene can't last forever because we're moving infinitely towards God. We're moving infinitely towards God. Things are changing, things are breaking up. And then there's two different ways the scene can break up. The first is the motive. A motive emerges. So, like, the reason that you did that act in the first place, there was some sort of reason inside of you that you couldn't tell really what it was, but you knew was there. And this can sometimes just suddenly appear. Suddenly you just know why you did it. And, this could be, the trans example. It could be the case that, like, before you realize you're trans, you, uh, you do a lot of cross-dressing or something. And then you realize suddenly, oh, I was doing that because I'm trans. And then, and so this example shows the kind of critical aspect of this is that something about when motive comes up is that it sort of robs the thing, the original act in the scene that formed around it of their power to compel. An act is, uh, an act has a power. An act is like creating this world where there's a power to compel. And then a scene is sort of elaborating on like what the possibilities are within this. And then a motive, motive, something, it sort of pulls out an element of that act, something that was within it, within you, and displays it and says, no, actually, it was about this the whole time. And that robs it of the ability to compel you anymore. And uh, there's the virtue associated with this is that you recognize it, you integrate it into yourself, you reflect on it, and you move on, right? Like once again, the goal is not to get stuck. The goal is not to be stuck in becoming. And also, I guess the thing that's worth noting, because people point this out to me, because I'm a Sagittarius, I got this kind of restlessness, I got mental disorders according to the psychiatric institutes. I don't know, but there is there is a way to there is a kind of becoming that is also involved, that like you can be leaning, you can be, there's pseudo activity, there we go, that's the word, it's a pseudo activity. There's a way to be remaining busy or doing things or moving around that isn't actually moving, right? We're talking about real becoming at the level, like the highest level, the deepest level, your soul, like really changing and growing at a deep level. And you can be just doing stuff that's actually avoiding you growing, because maybe what you need to grow and maybe you need to heal is to just relax for a short while, to trust someone, to take care of something in your day-to-day level, to um anyway. And so this has been a anyway. And so motive, and so motive is sort of like the motive is the sort of rational mode that, when we talked about earlier, the sort of rational necessity, like determinist mode. Motive is sort of when your act dissolves back into that, where you can say, okay, well, I did it because of this, that, or the other thing, right? And so your freedom that existed when you were sort of in the middle zone is gone. Then the other way it can dissolve is stage, which is where you just end up somewhere completely different. And uh, this is, so instead of like the ground being revealed, the sky has been revealed. um that that actually doesn't make it clear at all. But there's this thing that can happen where just like suddenly stuff suddenly it just doesn't make sense anymore, and it just doesn't make sense anymore. It just doesn't make sense anymore because something changed in you or something changed in the situation. um and like you're in this new zone, with a new, a new zone with a new set of possibilities that just doesn't actually have anything to do with the old one. And like maybe the old one needed to happen to get you there, but it doesn't seem like there's a clear connection. Something just changed. Sometimes your life just changes. Sometimes your life just changes. And this has to be embraced as well, right? Once again, you don't want to stay stuck. And like there's something mysterious about this, and you want to embrace it. You want to embrace it. Okay. Now, it's possible to implement these and sort of be living a more vital, a more magical, kind of wonderful life, creative life where you're learning, you're growing, you're creating things. But once again, there's a danger. There's a danger here because you could really be hurting people, right? You could really be hurting people. You could really be hurting yourself. You could be just acting in a way that is avoiding, like, once again, there's always this kind of deeper level. There's always a deeper level, you know? I don't know what my gesticulations are today. My gesticulations were so on point last time, and today I don't even know what they're doing. Ooh, ooh, look at me. Anyway, the um this is it's not enough. It's not enough to just have these, because this really mostly just gives you the true will side, but we also have to get the sacrificial love side. So now we move on to the divine virtues, which you need God's help for. You need prayer. You need God. Oh, hello. Here we go. All right. Um, they have, I don't know. They at one point in the system of Transcendental Qabala by Haela Hunt-Hendrix, they had proper names. They might still have proper names, but I kind of like the names, so I put them in here in my explanation of them. So they're Adaction, Apocalypse, and Endeavor. The Adaction maps on, so they also map onto the three Christian virtues of faith, hope, and love, as well as the three, like, monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And then I also map them to the Holy Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Um, and so these are a bit more mysterious, a bit, well, the other ones are mysterious as well, but these involve God. They involve, like, to access them, you can't just live bravely, you can't just sort of be tapped into yourself. You have to, like, they require real religious practice with prayer, participating in I always like to recommend the Eucharist is very powerful and very important. Your Episcopal churches, your local Episcopal church has the Eucharist, and you can get it if you're gay. Important. It's good for you. Jesus is there. He loves you. The prayer, yoga, meditation, great. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of things here too. There's all sorts of little rituals you can do where your goal is to access the sort of love that is the foundation of the universe, and is more than you and more powerful. All right. So these three. So let's talk about the first, which is maps onto faith. Um, the At any given time, you have a finite perspective. You have a finite perspective on the world. You have a finite perspective on yourself, and there is um, there is a sort of trust that you have to have that things will be okay, and that you have been given the tools you need and the perspective you need to act from where you are now. Um, and along with that, that the mistakes you make and have made can be forgiven. Like, forgiveness is really possible. It's actually possible to, like, to act in a way that is good, or at least good enough from where you are right now. Like, that there is always a, like, this is sort of the faith is sort of like the it's in a way, it's kind of the condition of possibility for all of these different things that we've been talking about, is that you have to have a faith that it is really possible to act in a way that is in accordance with a truly good will, a will that is truly aligned with God, a will that truly has, like, life and goodness in it, right? And that's hard to do. That's hard to do. And it requires grace. It requires grace. Um and oh, wait. 1 second, I think my cat might run in the room. Oh no, they're trying to sell viewers to me. Does anything about this setup make it seem like I am I am trying to I'm trying to cheap out and I'm trying to, like, cater to specific people? No one knows what this is. I don't know what this is. Anyway, I gotta let my cat in 1 second. Okie dokie. Oh, what a mess. Oh, what a mess. What a mess of a stream. It's all good. And so I link this to um, the Father. I link this to the Father. So the one of the essential things about God as God the Father is that God as God the Father is sort of like um the aspect of God or the person of God that is like closest to God's essence and is the most unreachable, right? Like um we're always like the Father and the Son are sort of like the Son is sort of reaching out to the Father infinitely, and the Holy Spirit is sort of flowing back and forth between God the Father and God the Son. But anyway, there is this sort of there is this sort of power and knowledge and sort of like like scariness um that is loving but also sort of sometimes feels beyond this. There's this um something about the pain of finite existence and like the fact that the world is messed up and sort of like that reality can be so painful. um Something about this is linked to God the Father and having a faith, and faith has something to do with like trusting in this, that this is like love and is goodness and is more powerful than you and knows more than you. um and even though I linked this to the Father, I also on this little chart, you know a important aspect of Christian faith specifically, um I note a couple of things. So creation from nothing, which I think I mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I'm petting my cat. The finite world is a gift, right? The world was created from nothing, and the only reason we're here, according to Christian dogma, although it's from a rational perspective, it's easy to come up with another perspective on this. But from Christian dogma, the world exists only as like God had so much love. God had so much love that God said, let's create more things besides ourselves so that we can love them even more. Because we've already got so much love. We're completely happy in ourselves. We don't need anything. But why not more? Just more. God is always more. God is always more. God always has more. God can just keep giving and giving. Um, and so that's one thing. And then another thing is uh, faith specifically in the resurrection of Christ, that Christ died for our sins and Christ really did rise from the dead in like a bodily way that can be like there's some sort of mystical experience of this, some sort of kind of like taste of it that you can sort of feel and have, and like something about knowing this sets you free. um and also I guess to link it to the virtue of the vow of obedience, which like you are whatever your little point of view is, your little perspective where you are at this time. You just do your best. You work with what you've got. You trust in the sort of thing that you've been given that's uniquely yours, um, in accordance with like staying in contact with God. Okay, so that's an action. Um, uh, then there's apocalypse. So the reason it's called apocalypse is that it is linked very directly to um thinking about heaven, which is like the highest possible fulfillment for everyone and everything, like the perfection of creation, the thing that the world was created for, right? At any given time, you have all these desires, you have all these things that you need physically, these lacks that you have inside of you for like love and comfort and just all these kind of things that are sort of demanding of you. Um, and everyone in the world is like suffering so much, and there's all these problems, and you have like all these kind of concerns that you're trying to take care of, like you gotta do your job, you gotta feed yourself, you gotta pay the bills, you gotta like call your girlfriend or whatever, right? um the virtue of apocalypse is uh having had faith, you try as much as you possibly can with God's help to turn your gaze and your like understanding of what you should do orient it and subordinate it towards a vision that you are cultivating actively by looking at the world around you and thinking and engaging in creating creating music and art and like thinking um and like loving, learning, growing, and all this stuff. You are actively using this data and your experience of it, and like you are trying to create and channel a vision of a perfect world. um what it would look like, what it would flow like, what it would feel like, what it would be like to experience this world, and for everyone in it to really be fulfilled. Like, how would it actually be possible? What do you really, really want? Like, what do you really, really want? Um, like trying to dig down to the deepest level of that instead of accepting like crappy surface level half answers, right? Because there are things in life that are nice and good, and the world is good and worth having. Once again, the world is a gift, so it's not bad that you can get a little treat, but that isn't what's going to save you. There is no particular thing that is going to save you, that is going to fill your lack in. And it isn't the perfected version of some franchise, when they finally get it right. It isn't like it isn't it isn't going to be romantic love. It isn't going to be it isn't even just being religious. Like, it isn't, if you convert to Catholicism, um that isn't like being a fully faithful Catholic on its own isn't going to do it. You become an artist. You get very successful at artists. You get very good at it. That's not going to do it. You make music. You go on tour. That's not going to do it. Even like a combination of a lot of these, it's still gonna be you. It's still gonna be you. Oh my God, can I get the gesticulation? It's still gonna be you. There's still gonna have this, you're still gonna have a lack in your heart because you still haven't reached God. God is still more. There's still more you can long for. And there's a kind of mode of being you can get into where the pain and that lack starts to feel like a gift, and it feels like you can grow and expand. And there's this image that David Bentley Hart likes to use a lot, that he brings from Gregory of Nyssa, where like you become a vessel that is getting filled and expanding and getting filled and expanding. And so like you can keep getting more and more of, there's a kind of life that you can get into where you're getting more and more of God, getting more and more divinized and more fulfilled. But you want more and more, like your desire grows, but your fulfillment grows, and your desire grows and fulfillment grows, because you want to want, right? You want to be satisfied, but you also want to want. And that there's some, but anyway, and so there's in basically developing a vision where like this could actually be realized in a way that is like sustained and like really powerful. Like the best, you could be living a life that is as powerful as the most powerful moments you've had, the most free, wonderful, intense, loving, scary, whatever, anything. Like that somehow there is a world where like this peak experiences are happening all the time, and like the you don't feel like that. That finitude feels like a gift. Finitude feels like a gift. Like God is really shining through in your life, for everyone, forever, intensely, powerfully, right? And so developing a vision of that, and like trying to slowly wean yourself off of desires that aren't aimed towards that. Because part of the wager of all this, which I guess I didn't mention earlier, is that there is there is a way, like there is a Christianity comes with a promise that God, like Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. Heaven is imminent. And a lot of like most a lot of kinds of thoughts, a lot of kinds of thought, philosophy, and even like, I don't know, more vulgar thought sort of also presupposes a kind of apocalyptic logic implicitly. Like ethics sort of points towards, especially like political ethics points implicitly towards an idea of a perfect justice, a perfect world, right? And this is already something that like as early as like Plato, they're already trying to theorize about like what would the perfect city be like, right? Um and ooh, okay. I just needed to aim it down. I think that actually fixed the problem. Um, and shoot, what was I saying? But no, so people online like to talk about communism or anarcho-communism or going into the VR world forever. Uh, or uh, or isekai. You get isekai, right? There is this implicit longing for everyone for a perfected world where things are fixed, where it's healed and it's better, and for it to really be like a world. Like there seems to be this implicit thing that we can think where it really really could be a world. And there is this desire that manifests to act towards it, that can manifest in political action or artistic action. Like there's this sort of beauty, this truth, this goodness that can be brought into the world, and that somehow there seems to be some kind of implied or hoped for at least linkage between you do your best little part and somehow this moves us towards um, this end goal. And it seems like at this point in history, um, it is actually really possible to think about like how your actions could really contribute towards bringing heaven. This is sort of, this is kind of the whole point of like Marxism. This is and that's part of why it remains such a dominant thing among like people who sort of have a little bit of a taste for freedom and love in a special way, like among queers. Um, and although there's other reasons too that are, I think, more insidious and more kind of overdetermined by the state and the media apparatus that wants to control people and keep them thinking it's 1910 still. Anyway, but what was I saying? Um, Hope, and this is where it connects to poverty. Basically, orienting, developing a vision, and then orienting your desires to want it more than anything else. And in turn, to let that wanting it more than anything else transform your lower desires and your more immediate impulses to aim them towards it, right? There's this image of Plato where you're the reason is this sort of charioteer that's sort of reining in, um, that's sort of reining in like lower the kind of lower parts of the self, the part that like wants to enjoy and the part that like wants glory. And oh my god, I dropped my pen that I've been fidgeting with this whole time. Yeah, and so that's sort of the idea here, that this sort of desire for the end goal, the desire for like this world where you could just do nothing but become in a way that's joyful and wonderful and lets you see God. Um, Orients your lower actions, transforms them, and creates them to be vessels to bring that about, right? So once again, this requires God's help, and it has the implicit hope, the implicit faith that things can really be healed. Okay. And then you have endeavor, which is where you act, essentially. Oh my goodness. I need more water. Why is my nose so itchy? You basically you consistently uh move towards these things that you have set out for yourself. Um, and this is a really like every day. It's it has to be done consistently, but you can always try again. You can always like try again. I don't know. Lately, I've been sort of keeping a like I have like a planner, but it's not really a planner. But I've been keeping like track of various kinds of activities that I am planning, like have important for me to do, I guess, that are part of my plan, like doing yoga and meditation and prayer and practicing guitar, practicing singing, practicing piano, doing my Duolingo German, um, like whether or not I'm eating out for food versus cooking at home, tracking these sorts of things. And it's been a very interesting experience where I like realize something about having it written down makes me sort of realize often that it's like, oh, it prevents this kind of despair where it's like, you've been messing up for so long that you don't even want to try, or like you've been messing up, and it prevents this sort of like there's some kind of like way that you can just always pick yourself back up. Momentum can always be regained. It's never completely gone. Um, but having momentum is even better, right? Uh, and uh, and this links to the Holy Spirit and to grace. Um, and uh, and it's like particularly important because we're within the divine virtues here, that this is aimed towards other people, like towards this movement towards all being one, um and sort of helping others to become as much themselves as possible. um and uh yeah, it requires God's help. It can be like every day is a new chance. Every day is a new chance again for this. um oh, there's this image about like cultivation, right? So like you, all your various like projects, your desires, the people around you that you care about, the world around you, like in general, your like actual environment, are all like things that can be cultivated and cared about and nurtured and brought up in a in like everything around you is sort of like a little pet or a little plant, or just like a fragile thing, right? Like there's and in being this, um it's they require care and attention. And there is this like, it's really possible for your life, like on a day-to-day level, to just be very, very, like, to be completely different, to really, really different. And it just requires you to sort of go forward one day at a time, which sounds kind of, you know, journey the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step kind of banality, but it is, but it's like true, right? um and and it's, you know, it's hard to remember, like it's banal, but it's true, and it's hard to remember because it's banal. And it's easier to remember if you've been through big changes in your life where you've seen this sort of happen. Like for me, it's easy, I always think about playing guitar and about just how many years it took to get good at it, and just how bad I was at first, and like these walls I kept running into where I thought I could never overcome. um I could never overcome this particular barrier about it. Um, I think about, you know, and this could be something that's more, you know, I've had vices that I like had a lot of trouble quitting, things that were very bad for me and bad for people around me that I would do because they were comfortable and help they I thought they helped, or maybe they helped for a time, but then they stopped being helpful and necessary, and they were just holding me back. And they were just very, it's very, very hard to quit doing something that is addictive. um but it is possible. You make a choice. You make a choice one time at a time to say, I'm not going to do that this time. Or you say, I'm going to be nice to this person this time. Or you say, like, you know, you can think about it even just within the purview of like romantic love. You know, I'm going to make sure that I do a little thing to care for her today, you know? Um or, you know, I'm going to pick up this little thing on the street. Or, you know, to bring it back to your own projects, you know, I'm going to practice today. I'm going to draw something. I'm going to write something. I'm going to try. I'm going to just do a little bit, you know? And it's hard. Um but the Holy Spirit is there with you, and you have help. You're not alone.